Thank you again for joining. Today is the second in a three-part series on simulation's role in next generation NCLEX success. A small group of experts will discuss virtual simulation in the classroom and beyond. We know your time is valuable and we appreciate you spending it with us. I first want to go over some logistics. Our experts will be answering some questions at the end of the presentation. So any questions that you have, you can type in the Q&A box and we'll answer as soon as possible. If we do not get to your question today, we will be sending a follow-up with some of the questions and answers again from our wonderful experts. The webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all attendees after today's event. And the first part of the series, as well as this, will be available on the OADN VSR website. Lastly, there is a survey at the end of the webinar, and your feedback is very important to us. So from there, I'm going to introduce our wonderful panelists. Teresa Cooney is an assistant professor at Howard Community College in a teaching concept-based curriculum with a pediatric focus that includes theory, clinical, and simulation. Liz Robison is a certified healthcare simulation educator advanced with the Society for Simulation in Healthcare, as well as a certified nurse educator with the National League for Nursing. Liz is also currently part of the board of directors for INACSL as the secretary treasurer. We also have Corinne Harrell, who is a certified healthcare simulation expert and a nursing faculty member at Phoenix College. And finally, we have Meg Lagunas, who is the Director of Clinical Learning Center for the College of Nursing and Health Sciences at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. So at this time, I am going to turn over to Meg.
Thank you so much, Courtney, and welcome everybody. We are super excited to get to spend some time with you guys and discuss some of our favorite topics. Free simulation products, active learning, and NGN. Should be a great time. As the wonderful Courtney told us, we're going to do a quick presentation and then we're going to follow this up with Q&A. So please get those questions ready and get those into the Q&A box. We can get the presentation started.
Good morning, class. I'm so happy to see you. Here is your wonderful 90-slide PowerPoint presentation for today's class. I'm going to get started because I have a 3-hour lecture. And you know, I like to talk fast because I want to make sure I get you guys out on time.
Why are there 90 slides? I don't think you can do this class. Melissa, can't you just record it?
No, I can't. Sorry.
I love coming to class. She just gives us everything we need to take the test.
Why did I even buy the textbook? Don't ask me any questions. I don't want to answer anything.
I wonder why they didn't want to talk during class today. I really put a lot of time and effort into that 90-slide presentation, and it was perfect. What am I going to do? I wonder why these exam scores were so low. I put so much effort into that PowerPoint presentation class. I really thought that this would work. What am I doing wrong? You know, I do remember when I went to the OADN convention last year, there was a workshop that talked about the merits of virtual simulation. And I remember I did virtual simulation for the past 2 years during the pandemic, and it worked really well. So I've noticed that I'm also hearing a lot more about virtual simulation being used in the classroom, and it's being used in the classroom quite successfully. I wonder, with the clinical judgment measurement model, how can I use virtual simulation, apply the CJMM principles to get better student test reports or test scores? I'll have to look into that, and I think I'm going to give that a try for my next class. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Well, class, that's the end of class today. I really think incorporating that virtual simulation made a big difference.
That simulation video really gave life to that patient.
I totally agree with you. For the first time, a patient from a paper case study came to life.
I know what you mean. I could not visualize what respiratory distress looked like. Now I know, and boy, we need to act fast to help our patient.
Me too.
Excellent. I'm glad our new strategy works. I'll try to incorporate that more in upcoming lectures. All right, have a good day. See you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Robison. I go by Liz. I want to start the second hour webinar regarding use of virtual simulation products that we have reviewed here on this portal. These are going to be free products, so we're showcasing how you can use free products in the classroom and beyond. So I have a particular class that I wanted to showcase in terms of a cardiovascular case. And I want to make sure that this case here that I select will align with my lesson plan. So I'm looking for heart failure, and that's what is specifically in my lesson plan. So I'm going to type in heart failure. And now I'm looking here on products available that have the characteristics of somebody with heart failure. And I happen to know the Arise product is a free product, so I click on that. And this is essentially how our portal looks here. It gives you the website, and I've already had this pulled up called Current Available Scenarios. So I'm going to just go to that screen so you can see how it looks. And that's how the product looks. I'm specifically looking at one that's heart failure patient in long-term care facility. You can see here with the yellow here, there actually are two different types of heart failure patients, one on the ventilator. This lesson plan is really targeting first-year students in their first med-surg course. So I'm keeping it cardiovascular while I'm keeping it at a simple process, really tying in the basic concepts that they've learned up to this time, fluid electrolyte, acid-base imbalance, and tying it into a clinical case with heart failure. Plus, there is a cardiovascular content within this first semester as well. And what I have done is I built a lesson plan. The lesson plan here is really targets this virtual simulation that I have picked to use. And so I'll give you a quick look at this lesson plan. And so this is how my lesson plan looks, and I'm tying in some hyperlinks specifically to this product. This is how the product looks when you open it up, when you take that link and click on it from the resources provided to you. Many of these are set up very similar. You start the course. I have this set up so you can kind of see it with different processes that are in the course. This happens to be the lesson objectives. You always want to make sure your lesson objectives here within our learning objectives here tie into your course lesson objectives. And I always pull that up to make sure that my objectives that I have for the class also tie into this particular learning objective for this virtual simulation. I'm going to kind of showcase that very quickly here. And so you can see here that this is the cardiovascular lesson objectives for the class, and many of those tie into this particular learning objective for this scenario here. So healthcare simulation standards and best practice talks about objectives and outcomes. You want to make sure in terms of best practices that you have that alignment with your anything you do with simulation. Virtual simulation is no different. And you can see here I've kind of looked at different things within this virtual simulation. Now, you can do it a variety of ways. I assign this as part of their prep work to prepare them for class, so they do this virtual simulation ahead of time. And then I created a Google Forms where they are now doing, I'm going to bring this Google Forms in class as an interactive activity. And that's part of that lesson plan that I shared with you that I've incorporated within that lesson plan for the classroom activities, things that support building this Google form, because I'm going to showcase really how I take this and build in next generation type activities within this Google form. Now, you can do it in a variety of ways. If you have a large class, it might be best to break up in small groups and then have each group do this Google form separately. If you have a smaller class, do this activity as a class activity and then assign different students to answer different portions of this, or groups of students to work together to answer different portions of the questions. The nice thing about this Arise product, it has videos that are embedded within the product. You can see this video here is a YouTube video. Google Forms, you can embed Google videos very easily into the product, and so that's what I have done. I've added a little pathophysiology video that I have found that I also assigned the whole video as part of the prep work to give them a little bit more interactive kind of presentation on pathophysiology of heart failure to tie in some of those concepts that they learned in their A&P course into the discussion. Now I'm going to give you this is the student view, so you can see here with the student view here how they would actually look at this activity. Let me get the student view. There's the student view. And so this is the student view. They click on here, they can watch the videos. Now this is my first activity that I bring in terms of aligning it with a formative assessment for next generation questions. So I try to have my questions and my activities in a formative, that means that we're going through it in class, it's not high stakes, it's not a part of a test. So they get used to seeing how the structure of next generation questions look, and they can start embedding that information and knowledge of those questions in how to best answer those questions. So this is a multiple matrix. This is looking at heart failure and hypertension. This is really bringing in that assessment piece of it. And then I added a column that's not associated with either condition because I like to have 3 columns in this kind of an activity. Here's another multiple select that goes along with similar types of NCLEX testing. And now, I'm tying in assessment activities with this. This all goes into supporting that virtual simulation that they have already been exposed to. And I've just taken different aspects of that and built different questions. This happens to be, again, I'm bringing in a video that was already as part of that product. And now I've developed a focused assessment. They've listened to the handoff. Now this is their focus assessment. Now what? Recognizing cues. So using that language as well from next generation NCLEX into a question, subjective and objective findings here. And now this next one here brings in information with the provider orders. And now I'm bringing in a very unique next generation type question. Now this one, the Google Forms doesn't allow a drag and drop here. You can see here, this I just created on PowerPoint, and then I took this image, made it an image, and put it in this area here. These are drop downs. And what it does is allows them to look at and go through this, and they could go back to this to see, this happens to be what is the priority question they have to pick here. Then action to take, first action, first parameter to monitor. Now I put first and second to make that alignment with them. You might see other examples where they don't do that in the drag and drop. Now the next one focuses on labs. Again, much of next generation is bringing in that electronic health record. So now these are labs. When you download this from the virtual simulation that they have done as part of their prep work, you can also download this and you then embed it. It downloads as a Word document. So if you don't want that red to show, then make the font black. And now I'm doing a close, drop down close. They're looking at laboratory results and having to prioritize interventions. So I give them these choices here. And now they're going to go back and look at medications that they might hold. And that's why that chart is very important. These are the medications. What might they hold as a result of the lab results, and give them a few choices to pick from. The next one here has to do with pharmacology. And you can see I've set up this Google form so they can progress without answering the questions. So you can set up any way you want to. Now these are tying in pharmacology in terms of the effect to the main condition, which is heart failure, which affects cardiac output. Now I'm having them look at the medication on how it influences cardiac output. And then that's the end of this activity. Make it very interactive. I know this is what quick show and tell of this activity. And at the very end of these virtual simulations, it gives you some food to think about in terms of other types of things you may want to build in along with this activity, this virtual simulation. So that was a stimulus behind this. Now this product has improved since we initially looked at it. And you'll see as part of this project, they also have created their own lesson for acute heart failure with next generation questions. And it uses a very similar case. It still uses Hector in the case, but you can see their platform here. You can actually drop and drag these questions. And so they also have a next generation platform of questions. And it's the only one right now that I see that targets acute heart failure, dropping and dragging these questions, but it gives another set of activities that you can do. This is the same gentleman we had in this virtual simulation with a long-term care facility, but now they're incorporating different types of questions that are next generation type questions into this activity that they also have incorporated within this virtual simulation platform. And that's the down and dirty of this activity. Hope you enjoyed it. And we have a few other activities coming forward on using the free virtual simulation in the classroom and beyond.
Hello everyone, my name is Corinne Harrell. I am the simulation coordinator out here at Phoenix College in Arizona. One of the things that I've done with virtual simulations in a classroom setting, so they're actually in the lecture hall, is to use these Ryerson TeamWorks simulation setting and videos with this. So first thing I did actually was to come back to the main map. So I logged in and kind of searched all of the different scenarios that they had to find one that was going to fit the topic that I was working on. So I was actually working in our peri-op content at the time and dealing with surgical patients as well as their going home time, right? So there's those different phases of surgery. So within the med-surg section, there were two of them. This TeamWorks simulation is about a post-operative patient. So it hit several learning objectives for us. One, it hit some of that interprofessional communication, which was the whole main part for Ryerson. It didn't hit all of my peri-op objectives. However, the videos and things in this were fabulous. And the interactions between the different team members all happen within that setting. So to find the different objectives, when you hit play game, you can actually view the learning objectives in this one. So this was all designed into that collaborative practice and how are you going to navigate working with others, as well as some communication stuff. So there's some SBAR pieces in there, and he is a post-op hip surgery patient. So that's kind of where I started, right? So I went to figure out what kind of patient and what simulation. So with that patient, I take a few different things and I actually add in having the students identify discharge needs, discharge risks, and working through that as part of the first section of it. So when I'm looking at this, I actually have to create a couple different scenario pieces. So when I'm creating my scenario pieces, I actually have created next-gen questions that I take and work the students through with. So before I have them even get into the scenarios, I have them pull up this H5P question set, which is based off of some of those different like drag and drops and extended like multiple selection items in Canvas. So this is an H5P drag and drop item that I created and I uploaded there. However, you can use it in another format as well. So this is where I'll have them pull this up first. And within that, I also have the downtime version. So I do this in two different ways. We have our very high-tech H5P format where they pulled that up, and then I have my downtime form. So when you're creating the H5P question, you have to make the base first, which is this picture, and then you can add all of those words in and where they're going to go. In the classroom, I have a bucket full of different items that are on little cards, so they can actually physically take those out. So Mr. Marchand is actually a post-op patient from a hip surgery in the game. So when you first click, go ahead and begin. I always pull that game up on my screen in the front of the rooms and then start walking them through it. But before we start, I give them that little bit of information, that what his surgery type was, and ask them, just based off of that, what are some of those potential discharge risks or discharge needs that your patient could have? And I have them place that in that potential discharge risks, right? So we're just brainstorming anything that could potentially be needed for that patient. After that, I will actually then press play. So we kind of put that on hold. I do put my students in groups of no more than 2 really for this. So they get to talk and collaborate a little bit themselves on that. But it's not so much that not everyone's voice is being heard. And then we press play on the game. The first 2 scenes in the simulation cover us walking into the room, finding Mr. Marchand and his partner, and they're kind of arguing a little bit because his partner has put up 2 different side rails, the bottom ones on his bed, because he was sleeping and he left the room. So he was a little concerned for his partner and thought that maybe he was going to get hurt if he would fall out of bed. Of course, Mr. Marchand isn't concerned about that. He thinks he's going to be fine. During this interaction, the case manager comes in and basically is talking to Mr. Marchand, kind of ignoring the partner and telling him, hey, you know, we talked yesterday. We're really excited that you look like a great candidate for early discharge. So we're going to continue working with that today. Of course, Mr. Marchand is pleased with this, so happy. He leaves the room, and then you get some more. So you find out through this, there's a couple things that he says. So the partner is very concerned about equipment. Somebody said I needed to get some stuff. I don't know what we need. I don't have anything. What are you going to do with the stairs? How are you going to get around? So his partner's very concerned, doesn't think we're actually ready to go home. Does not think we're ready to go home. Of course, Mr. Marchand is super happy and he wants to leave the hospital. Who wouldn't as a patient? He does, though, say in response to his partner asking about the stairs, well, if it wouldn't hurt so much, I'm sure it would be just fine. Right? So they have to be able to pick this out. There is a couple questions that they have to work through on the game at that point. So for that, how we move through it is that the room has to come to a consensus on what we're picking for each of those questions. And then we can talk about the responses and why those are better or not better as we move through the game. And then maybe they have to pick a different option if they maybe didn't pick the right one to progress. Once they have seen that first couple scenes and we've determined that this patient has some needs and we're trying to figure out what to do, so we're going to start to go collect the team members and ask those questions, that's when we actually have them stop again. And then I will have them work on their question. So I'll have them pull this out again. So either it's up in Canvas on their computer or on their hard copy on the desk, and they can pick different things out that are patient specific. So now that's the thing, is I want them to pick the patient specific ones. What are specific to this patient in this moment? So hopefully they caught that Mr. Marchand mentioned that if it didn't hurt so much, maybe he'd be able to walk more. So pain management might be a discharge need. He does use a walker. And he needs some equipment. We'll just say that's, maybe that's all the things that they found. When they hit submit, it will tell them how many they got right out of how many. They also need to move so they can click retry and then try again for this patient. So what's specific to the patient? So those are some items on there. And they can retry it. If I have them working just on the paper form, then I can pull that up and have them walk through that in particularly, and we can discuss those different needs for the patient on the paper form. And we continue to move through the scenarios. Setting this up really isn't too hard, but you do have to have this. So in order to set up the H5P, I use Publisher in order to make the different background pictures for the different types of those drag and drop type questions that are next gen. So I print those out, I have to save it, and I upload that into the background section on the H5P drag and drop, and then put that in. So it's not too crazy hard. Hoping to review more of that and do some hands-on stuff in our conference in November. So hopefully we'll see you all there, and hopefully this sparked some ideas for you.
Hello, class. I'm really excited for our 2-hour lecture today. How's everyone doing today?
Great. Another class day talking out into the internet with no way to gauge my audience. Oh well.
I have a really long lecture. It's about 60 slides, so I guess let's just get started.
Hello, my name is Meg Lagunas, and I too have suffered from many of boring Zoom virtual classes. I teach in a distance education program, so I get to have the mixture of having students sitting in front of me as well as students via virtual. So here is one example of how I use virtual simulation cases to bring some life and some discussion and perhaps some attention to my virtual classes. Just like Miss Liz demonstrated to us earlier, I too use the Arise product. And just as a quick reminder here, you can go ahead and grab that product right off of the OADN and Unbound virtual simulation reviews. You can just snag it off of the website, which then takes you to that giant list where you're able to snag which case you want. So the case that I use is this one, the therapeutic communication end of life. I use this with my senior 2 nursing students, so they're just about ready to graduate. And it really is a great case for them to not only practice their therapeutic communication, but really to also get to think about how do we actually provide care to both a family and a patient at the same time. The videos in this case are excellent and they're nice and short, and so it works really well. So the way I run my class is I would start out the class saying, you know, this is what we're going to do today. We are going to work through caring for a patient who is on comfort care, who's at the end of their life. And I would literally show the screen that I'm showing you guys. We would start the course together. We'd go through these first couple of ones, and then I would pause here at the scenario and I'd give them a few moments to read through this and start kind of processing this. Then I would launch into the handoff report. The handoff report is very nice and concise. And then what I would do is I actually would share this Google Doc with them. And I just put the link in the chat box and the students can all bring it up and they all can work into it. And I have them essentially apply their what they've heard and what they've seen and what they wonder about this patient into kind of an organization format. I find that this just helps students to kind of get their brains clustered together and we're ready for that next step and really thinking about, okay, this is what I do when I'm in practice, right? I listen to a nurse report, I might read a few notes, but I'm ultimately taking notes for myself and preparing myself for my shift. We spend a decent amount of time talking about kind of this concept of shift to-dos. What kind of cares are we anticipating we're going to need to provide for Laura and her family, and kind of how do we picture our shift progressing, knowing what we know about end-of-life care. After we have that discussion, I come back to the case and we continue to work on it as a group. The next couple of videos are all from the perspective of the family member, Miss Laura's mom. There is 4 or 5, I apologize, 4 or 5 little short snippet videos, 1 minute each. And they do a really great job of kind of prompting some real emotion, as well as providing some actual visual assessment data for our students. Although mom is kind of front and center with her questions and her emotions, Laura in the background, especially in video 3 and 4, is having some pretty well acted agonal breathing that provides a great opportunity to prompt students to say, hey, what are you observing with Laura? What kinds of nursing interventions or what kind of medications might we expect or want to request to be able to help not only Laura's mom, but also Laura during this time frame. After each of these little video clips, there is a question that is automatically prompted by the virtual game. What I tend to do is you have to go through these questions. And so what I usually do is I pull up my Zoom poll feature and I do the whole like A, B, C, D, let people poll in, and then that's the answer that I pick. Just randomly picking one and I'm incorrect. So then it takes me back to 1. So you might want to have your answers written down so you know what you want to do. But then you go through all the videos. At the end of the scenario, Laura does pass away. So that provides opportunity to then open up the floor for additional discussion about postmortem care, as well as discussion about, really what happens when somebody dies inpatient. I love this case because it is short, sweet, well done, and has lots of opportunity for open-ended discussions. Small breakout groups in Zoom can be really great for this. If you start wanting to divide out, great with medications. You can, if you work tightly with any community partner and you're able to get a copy of their kind of standing orders for comfort care, you can certainly share that with your students and have each student look up different meds and kind of share that. So one way to have a discussion and really tie in that whole clinical, that whole judgment model piece through the use of some videos that stream very nicely over Zoom. Hope that helps.
Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed that presentation. We do have time for some questions, and we have received some questions coming in during the presentation. The one that we had was thoughts on ways you can incorporate the free virtual simulation products in clinical.
I think it's very easy to use any of the virtual simulations that are free that we have on the VSR. In clinical, you can actually pair it with, I've had students where we know that one unit is mostly respiratory or one unit is mostly ortho. We can have the clinical adjunct or the faculty can then find the simulation that is similar to the patient population that they're seeing. And especially when it's slow or they're having downtime, you can then show the virtual simulation and do the similar techniques, such as what any of my colleagues had just demonstrated. It can be elaborate. It could be a piece of paper that they have to write down on. And you can even use your debriefing methods afterwards as part of your post-conference. So, and I think the nice part is the clinical instructor can then constantly refer back to the patient population that they're seeing at that point. But now they're giving them an actual opportunity to physically see a patient in distress, right? And maybe they don't get that, or they miss that patient that comes in the unit that's in distress. They're only recovering them afterwards. So definitely use it in clinical.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to Teresa's comments. When I showcased the Arise product, I mentioned that at the end, there's a lot of different kinds of things to think about and how you can integrate it. I'm all about using resources, not reinventing resources. So you can really look at some of those questions. If you know you're in a particular kind of specialty area that one of those products address, take a few moments before, when you're preparing for clinical, look at those questions and then bring some of those questions in so they can be thought-provoking, what I call Socratic questioning types in your post-conference and clinical. Many times we don't have structure in those post-conferences, but I'm telling you, when I had structure in post-conferences, sometimes those bring in real life examples that the students can bring in and embed and try to incorporate that language, what I call that next generation language, into your discussion. Okay, what cues did you see with your particular patient? Using that language and getting them used to that thought pattern is so important for our learners. So clinical is a great opportunity because it's real life.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Liz. We also had a question. Do you find having students in a classroom complete the VSIMs all together as a class, individually, or small groups to be better?
So,
I'll take this one.
Sure, go ahead.
So from my personal experience, I think it greatly depends on what your objectives are and how many sometimes. There is, if you have the ability and the time to allow them to move through some of these virtual sims on their own and can kind of wander around the room to answer those questions as they're talking about it individually, it does give them a little bit of time to collaborate with each other versus the whole group where they have to talk, like they all have to agree, and not everyone necessarily agrees on how they want to move through that virtual simulation because they're all at different levels. But sometimes that also is an advantage because then they can learn from each other and we can explain to everybody as you move through that. So if you only have maybe an hour for class, moving through it together may be more beneficial versus having the smaller groups where they're moving at different paces and you can't guide all of them toward those maybe correct answers or help pull using that Socratic questioning and pull out their thoughts because they're basically just floundering through it, kind of like they do when they're at home by themselves. So I think it really depends. I've seen both and I've used both. Just a lot, for me, it was a lot of time. If we had a lot of time that we could work through and I could allow them to do their individual thoughts, it worked out well.
And my situation is similar. Unfortunately, though, I have very large classes. I have 80 to 90 students in a class. And so what I found is using virtual simulation brings the textbook more to life and the students really enjoy it. But I don't have, like Corinne was saying, that luxury of doing that deeper dive. So instead, what we do is we do it as a large group. We take a vote, like the same way that Meg did with her students, take a vote as to what the correct answer is. I'll click the correct answer, we'll move it forward. But I'll also put a different twist on it. We have created, let's see, Courtney, could I have ability to share my screen, please?
Absolutely.
We created, see if you can see my screen here, flip cards. And we took the clinical judgment measurement model and our program put together the cards. And when we get to certain parts of the simulation, I will pause it and say, all right, where are we in the clinical judgment measurement model? And they can flip to that card. And we always focus on, you know, like generate solutions. What can I do, right? Or what will I do? And then if you flip these flip cards over, you all can see my slides, right? Okay. On the back side is the actual explanation of what each step is for the clinical judgment measurement model. And the students like this because not only does it give them a manipulative, but while they're watching the video, they can then read, all right, this is what I'm trying to identify. So then when I pause it, we can then have a more thoughtful conversation. And how great are these to have in your pocket when you're at clinical, right? You just don't even, you don't need them just in the classroom. What if you're in simulation? What if you're in skills lab, right? And because we found these to be so helpful, we're posting, and I know this picture is blurry, but we're making life-size posters of the clinical judgment measurement model, all right? We've got your 6 cognitive skills on one side and all the details on the other. And we're placing these not only in the classroom, but in the sim room, in the skills lab. We're making real giant ones. And so as I'm talking or demonstrating the VSIM as we're going through it, I can just walk over and touch which section we are in for the clinical judgment measurement model. And this is easy. This is something everybody can do, right? You could get it done by the end of the business day, right? It's one of those great, great tricks. So that's how, for me personally, has been my workaround in using virtual sim in the classroom. in a large classroom. And in this way, those that want to speak, they can have the conversation, they can vote, and then that then drives the conversation to move the simulation forward.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Corinne. I think we do have time for one more question. We had a few more come in. Again, I apologize if we have not gotten to your question. We will have our experts here answer those and have the follow-up for you available. One question that came in a few times is where to find these resources.
And I'm thinking they're talking about the free resources that we talked about. So we are part of the OADN simulation committee, as mentioned in the intro, and we review virtual simulation products. And so the site that we're referencing is the virtual simulation reviews, and I can pop that open. That's available for anybody to register free. I'll share my screen so you can see that real quick. Anybody can register free at this site. It's unboundmedicine.com/OADN. And we invite you to register in that site, and you can access any of the products that we have reviewed within this platform. You can see here all the products we currently have reviewed. It's real simple. It's just a great resource because if you don't have to remember where links are to these free resources, you can just actually go to this product and have access to that anytime you want to. So that's what's nice about this product. Plus, it's the products have been reviewed. Each of the reviews have some very specific information on it. So take a look at that. There are some other webinars that we specifically go over this. Once you get onto the site, you'll see some webinars and it can go over some details about this website.
Thank you, Liz. And I will actually share the screen as well with that website listed for an easier visual reference. And again, we thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for your time. A special thanks to our student actors and to our wonderful presenters. We hope that you all have an excellent day, and please keep an eye out for the survey that will be coming as well as the recorded follow-up. Thank you, and we will see you next time. We have another webinar on November 2nd, which is the third part of the series.